Hey everybody, happy Monday, February 5th. Welcome to the TED Show, episode 110. I can't believe I hit 110. That's not my age, for those of you wanting to make a joke. This is my guest, the beautiful and talented Janie Lacy. Thank you for being here. We are in a different room every day, so we're never sure if you can hear us or see us. I know it's a little hazy in the background, but at least I don't have the giant forehead reflecting the sun, which is what I was telling Janie might see JC already. I can't even talk. It's Monday. Let us know you can hear us and see us. We would definitely be sad and remiss if we didn't ask that question, especially since we're in a kind of a different room. So let us know you can hear us and see us, and welcome. I appreciate you being here. We've been trying for a while, right?
We have.
But that's me. Well, I'm sure I'm going to take all the fault for that, because that is definitely my fault, my problem with my crazy schedule. But you also have a crazy schedule, and so I want to tell them the story about how we sort of met. You did good. Thank you, Sanjana. Thank you. She's on the show later this week. You did a relationship panel, right?
I did.
This is Will Carey and Naisha and everybody. It was a relationship panel, and it was me, Charlie, Will, and Pernell.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
And Will and I were the married guys, and hey, John. And Charlie was not
single.
And Pernell was not either, also single. But I want to tell you that is one of the best panels I think I've ever served on, because the women, and this is a testament to Janie, the women in the audience were so raw about the questions they asked us. And I was, of course, the oldest one there and the longest married, even though Will's coming up behind me. But I just loved how you moderated that, because some of those women took a huge risk in sharing questions, not only in front of a group of people they didn't know, but in front of 4 dudes up at the front fielding questions. And I'll never forget, there was one question, and then we'll get to Janie, sorry, but I love this story. I tell it a lot. A woman asked about how we would react as men if because she had breast cancer, and how the intimacy was. And if you could have seen Will, Pernell, and Charlie's faces go white, they were just like, what? And I just felt so moved to talk to her, because but that wouldn't have happened without Janie's moderation and without her creating an environment that was comfortable for those women and for us guys at the front. So welcome. Thank you.
I've
done the whole talking now. Here, we're done. That was a great show. 4 minutes.
It
was amazing. But thank you for doing that. I think it was very empowering, and I left there thinking, wow, if we could get more people to open up about these things.
Yes.
So give them a little background. So now you know how we met. There's our how we met story. Give them a little background about you.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm the CEO and founder of Life Counseling Solutions. We're a full counseling center in Maitland, Florida. There's 9 therapists. We all specialize in different areas, so we are a specialty center. So we work from children to couples to mental disorders to toxic relationships. We do seminars. We have groups. So we have a monthly anger management group that we have to the community. We get court order to self-improvement. We have our Women Redeem group that's going on right now, which we'll talk about later. We have a Safe Haven group, which are for women that have had a relationship trauma, meaning that their partners were considered a sex addict. And then we have a substance abuse support group for women that are going through their own recovery. So I can go on and on. So we have a lot of resources and things for the community, and we like to get out and partner with different organizations to destigmatize mental health in particular and promote mental wellness, that we all need to work towards having mental wellness, and we don't have to suffer in silence.
I love that. All right. So, but tell us how, I want to get, like you mentioned about 10 things that I want to talk about. So, but let's get the basics of where Janie Lacy came from, because people like to know like a little history. So did you always know you wanted to be in the mental health world?
Absolutely not. So it's actually funny. So I actually didn't believe in therapy. I was one of those people that, why would you go to a stranger and talk to about your problems?
A lot of people feel that way.
And I came from that culture and that background that you bring it to God or you don't talk about it. So coming from a family where you deal with your problems to yourself, or you take it to God, or you don't talk about your problems. But I actually think God had a different path for me. So I was in the MBA program at UCF, and I actually had a lot of difficulty actually public speaking. believe it or not.
Really?
So, we'll tell my testimony another time. But when I was 4 or 5, I had rotten teeth as a little girl, and I had a dad who did not speak good English. So I came into this world had low self-esteem, didn't know how to talk, and then I had to take speech therapy, and I would cover my mouth because I had rotten teeth. So I was in college in my undergrad program, and I was taking business classes where we had to do presentations and we had to stand up in front of people, and it would cause me so much anxiety.
Of course.
So I signed up for a program at UCF called the Leadership Enhancement Program. But this is why I think it's God, because you had to have at least a bachelor's degree to be in the program. And I was in the bachelor's program, and I didn't have my bachelor's degree. But I said I was going to apply anyway. So a lot of the women in the group already had master's and PhDs. But I got accepted.
That's amazing.
Part of my goal with that group was to be able to stand up and publicly speak. That was my goal. Wow. So to make a long story short, through that process, I got paired with a mental health therapist.
He's got a great sense of humor, doesn't he?
He had a great sense of humor to go around to the university and talk about how to bloom where you're planted, how to just do different things right where you are as working at UCF in what they would call blue-collared status. So through that, I got introduced to mental health counseling, and I enjoyed the presentations and the workshops that we did. So then afterwards, when they would have one-on-one, I had said to myself, I actually like this. So I'd never been to therapy at that point, and I had a mentor, Dr. Dyken, who's still at UCF over the Student Health Services, and he was kind of like my father mentor figure. So I went to him, and I said, I think I'm going to drop out of the program that I was applying for, the MBA program, and I think I'm going to apply to counseling program. And he had said to me, and I was so anxious because he was like a father figure, that when he had said, I don't know why I didn't think of that sooner, that just still
There's your answer. That's it, right?
Yes. So
because you were looking for that.
I was looking for validation, so I dropped out of didn't finish the MBA program. And
isn't that amazing how your life takes a different direction like that, all depending on who you meet? There's so many mentors in our lives, and you don't plan on them having an impact. I mean, when you meet somebody anywhere, you never think the first time you meet them, oh my God, this person's going to change my life or change the direction of my life. But that's what happens so more often than not. And we've got a lot of people saying hello. Marty says hi. Carrie Rose said hi earlier. Jen Waterman said hi. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry. I'm trying to read at the same time. And listen, I want to be present here because Janie's got a lot of great information. Thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people, we talk about it on the show all the time, people think, okay, you're here, you're Janie Lacy, there's no way you could have had any trouble. You came out of the womb and you could talk and you look beautiful and you're amazing. And people sit back and then judge themselves and are so hard on themselves because they haven't met the right mentor or they haven't figured out how they're going to handle the obstacles that they have. And it's so good that you shared that story, because I think so many people need to hear it. You're not alone. You definitely are. Whatever you're going through might be unique to you, but I can tell you there's a lot of other people out there who have had similar obstacles. And you have to find a mentor. You have to find someone. And a counselor could be that person. So Janie was saying she was not a believer in that, but then you became a believer. And so did you, and if this is a personal question, I'm sorry, I always like to ask. I had counseling for many, many years, all at UCF, by the way. Pete Fisher, a great friend of mine, and thanks to him, I had a mentor and I had somebody who could help me. Did you eventually decide, all right, I need to go through this, I have issues
Absolutely.
I need? Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Good.
So obviously I'm a big consumer of counseling, and I'm a big
I
promoter
like
of
that,
counseling.
a consumer.
So I will still go to counseling if I get stuck, or if I feel like I need some objectivity, or I just need a safe space where nobody can tell my business
right.
By the law, then I will go. I'm a big consumer. I believe we all need people in our life that can reflect what we're going through and help us see things clearly, no matter what. We don't necessarily even have to be going through anything. Sometimes we could just be going through nothing.
Well, sometimes that's right, because sometimes it's hard. All the people who are in our lives that obviously love us and care about us, that doesn't always mean that they can give us the advice or show us the things that we need to be shown, because they're so immersed in it too.
Right.
So isn't it awesome to have somebody who's completely objective, listening to you? Seriously, they sit on a couch. Isn't that what everybody wants? I just want to be heard. Hello. Right. So you sit on a couch, you sit in a chair, and they're listening to you, and all they're doing is reflecting back to you what you're saying and kind of giving you points about what you're saying, instead of telling you all the things you have to do. That's what a lot of people say. Well, I don't tell anybody my problems because I don't want to be told what to do. What you're really looking for is to be heard and listened to, and of course validated at some point with how you're feeling. And that's what a counselor can do. So I'm also a big, huge proponent of it.
That's a part of what we do. So I also want to say this, part of it is that we do active listening and we do reflection, but I'm also experiential therapist. So I believe that sometimes we can't just sit and talk about our problems. We have to work it out. So the body keeps the score. So we need to sometimes get in the body and connect mind, body, and our soul, so to speak. So we'll do a lot of experiential type things in our counseling. I'm an EMDR therapist, so those that don't know what that is, that's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's an evidence-based therapy that we use for veterans that come back from the war, people related to that, where they have PTSD, that they can't move on to the better things in life because they can't move past where they are. They have a negative charge when they have certain memories or certain things that come up.
Sure.
So we use the same techniques by using eye movement to different other types of situations. It doesn't necessarily have to be from war. It could be a car accident, or I can't get over my breakup, whatever those things may be. So just sitting and talking about it, it's in the head, but sometimes we got to get in the heart and connect the two to move forward.
Absolutely, because your therapy is really only as good as you're willing to get into it, right? I mean, if you're not willing to invest, or you're telling your therapist, your counselor, things that aren't true, then there's really nothing you're going to benefit from that. You're not going to be able to move forward. I love the fact that you get into that with them. And so we were talking earlier about the different programs. PTSD is a big one for me. We're actually working on a veterans project that is PTS now, I think they're really calling it. They changed the vernacular, but we're working on a project where we're going to be talking to vets. And Jose Belen and his wife Danielle have a group, that Mission Zero. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but the 22 soldiers that commit suicide daily is the statistic. And so it's just so important to address these things. And we were talking about toxicity earlier.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. I had somebody tell me this morning about a relationship that she knows about where the girlfriend was abused by the boyfriend. And she said to me, which I thought was very insightful yet sad, wow, we can really pick them, can't we? And Melody Garcia says hi, by the way.
Hi, Melody.
We love you, Melody. But that is the pattern, right? So we joke about it in society, oh my God, girls only want bad guys. But there is so much toxicity and a repeat behavior, and a lot of people don't realize that at the base of it, there's one common denominator, in my opinion, and that's the person who keeps picking the people. So how do you figure out, or how do you get people to realize that there are issues they have to address in order to get out of these toxic relationships?
No, I think first we want to dispel the stereotype or the myth that people who end up in bad relationships, or in particular women who end up in bad relationships, that there's something wrong with them.
Correct.
So many times these are women that they're professional, they're six-figure themselves, they could be alpha females. You may look at them, they may be on the news, they may have a lot of different things going on for them. So you can look at them and think they have it all together. But sometimes there's another side to life, and sometimes if we don't know how to deal with our own brokenness and why we do the things that we do, it will manifest and it will come out in context of our relationships. And that could be doesn't always have to go back to our childhood, but if we've had some not so healthy things, or come from a situation where we were we were not validated, we were not loved, or a common one that people don't understand is emotional neglect. It's real easy to say, 1 out of 3 girls are sexually abused by the time that they're 18. That is a statistic, that is a fact.
That's so sad.
But the other part of it is we don't take time to understand how we were neglected emotionally. Because as parents, we have to be good enough. We have to reflect to our kids who they're going to be.
Right.
So many times if our parents were trying to just get through life and get to working, and they weren't able to look at, little Johnny and say, or little Susie and say, you know what, you are beautiful and you're doing the best that you can, and mom's whatever that may be. When we had those types of experiences repetitively, sometimes we're looking for, to the extreme, validation and affirmation of who we are in the eyes of our lover. And many times that may not, and that's not necessarily completely unhealthy, but if that is what fills us up, then we're going to have a void, and we're going to continue to fill that void. And that means that sometimes we will compromise our values and our belief system. And if we don't understand what our values and our belief system, then that's where it'll be like, well, he only hit me one time. And then we will start compromising over and over and over again. And then we get into what we call traumatic bonded relationships. That means essentially I'm going to stay with someone who can't love me the way that I need to be loved, but I'm bonded to them and I can't leave. So many times we'll have women, Ted, say that, I know this person isn't good for me. We're toxic. We have these all these situations that are happening. There's domestic violence, there's emotional, a lot of other underlining currents to that. So we look at the pattern. There's a difference between in relationship patterns and problems. Everyone has problems in relationships, but if we have a pattern in a relationship, not only with that person, but through the relationships in our life, then we have to look at ourselves, and we have to really examine our self-worth, our beliefs, our values, because if we don't understand what our values and our self-worth is, and our beliefs about who we are, then we will dictate and we will move to whatever that person may be. You know, we hear this word narcissism all the time, but a lot of times the women that are in my Women Redeemed group in particular are attracted to I'm using the word very loosely here, a narcissistic man, right? Because he comes off very charming in the very beginning. He has it together. He can fulfill that daddy role. He's coming in, he's an alpha male, and every woman to a certain degree wants that male to kind of come in and cover her.
Sure.
But if he himself is wounded, and the true narcissist doesn't understand he's wounded, it's a true blind spot, which is why women will stay in these toxic relationships, because they think they can fix him, and only if he gets it and only if he understands. But a true narcissist will not, because he can't see it. It's not in his blind spot.
Not even going to happen.
You will be repeating that same pattern with the same person over and over again.
Right.
Which is why, in the context of teaching women where they were wounded at, because if I have a problem with
that's great
rejection or not good enough and those types of things, but yet I could be a powerful woman, an alpha woman, it's going to come out in the bed with my lover, so to speak, right? Because even another part of it, and I'll say this, Ted, is that sometimes we have mom problems. Sometimes they're always looking at, for women to looking at our dads, and it's a man issue. You know, we didn't have a daddy, we have daddy issues, those types of things. But sometimes we have a mother hunger.
Sure.
And we're looking for our mom in the bed with men. We're looking for that validation, that nurture. So
the nurturing, right?
Yes, exactly. So that's when women in particular will have the ideal of who they want their man to be. I want him to be my best friend. I want him to be my lover. I want him to be my pastor. I want him to be my father. And they have unrealistic expectations, and they have an insatiable need to be loved and affirmed, which is why sometimes when I'm sitting with couples, the guy will say, well, whatever I'm doing is never good enough. I'm a rock between a hard place. You know, those types of dynamics can manifest quickly if we don't understand where our brokenness is.
So I have a question, or actually Mary Tiffany made a comment. My first husband was abusive. That was his issue. The fact that I stayed in that relationship was my issue. And I think that what you're saying is you have to find the wounded spot. Is that what you said earlier? You have to find where your wound is and what it is that's continuing to drive you or creating that place where you're going to stay in a relationship. Obviously, there's an innate feeling of knowing this isn't good for me. There's got to be, even buried somewhere. I remember my parents, of course, were in a horrible relationship with each other, and they both knew it but wouldn't get out of it. It was just a constant feeding. And what did you say? Traumatic bonding?
Yeah, we call it trauma bonding.
You know what? That's a new term that I haven't heard, but I've always believed that that's exactly what happens. That's why the abused stays with the abuser, or one of the reasons. And that's so fascinating to me. Mary Tiffany said, I was raised in a Roman Catholic family. Both my family and the priest told me divorce was not an option. I hope that because of the world that we live in now, that people are more amenable to that and not accepting of the fact that they need to stay in it. Believe me, it's on the news all the time, so it's not like it's going away anytime soon. You can watch an SVU episode, which I do in the afternoon sometimes, and you can see that it's still here. It's still part of everything that we're doing, and we're having to deal with it. And then what that does is that continues to impact. It's like the generational thing that they talk about in the Bible. I mean, honestly, you're just repeating over and over again, so the next generation is going to see that, and that's their only norm. And how do they get out of it? So do you deal with the children when you're dealing with the relationships, or how does that all work so that you try to help them break the cycle?
Right. It's different for everyone, but I do want to say this, and I didn't say this at the beginning. One of the reasons why I am so passionate about Women Redeem is my oldest sister was murdered when I was 10 years old by the father of her children. So there's domestic violence, there's a lot of toxic stuff. So, you know, there's also this heart passion for me, for women to be healthy and to make healthy decisions, and to also be able to understand where they were wounded at, because there's a lot of shame. So when we're in toxic, unhealthy relationships, we don't want to talk about it, especially if I'm going to be showing up to the Citrus Club with my husband the next week, right?
Correct.
So we will suffer in silence, And I think there's a certain part of that where you do honor your relationship in the sense that you don't put all your business out there. But then there's that fine line when it gets to be toxic, then women don't know how to ask for help. So there's a lot of shame in that situation while they'll stay in it a lot longer. Because sometimes it's also, especially if you're dealing with a narcissistic man, you're going to think it's your fault. So it's talking about the guilt from the church. If you are a guilt-ridden person, it's real easy to be guilt-ridden and you're thinking, well, maybe it's me, maybe it's, you start questioning yourself, so you'll stay in things a lot longer. But when we look at the masters and the disasters of relationships, which I like those terms.
I like those terms, the masters and the disasters.
Yes.
Wow.
So the masters, going to that example, the first time someone's very disrespectful and violent in the relationship, they're out. And the reason why they're out and when they've mastered healthiness is because they know who they are.
Right.
And they have strong boundaries. But when we come from disasters, whether it's our own family of origin, our own history and relationships, we will compromise those values over and over again. So when we're dealing with toxic relationships, we have to look at the totality of their situation, because it's not easy especially if a woman is relying on her husband financially, it's not just easy just to get up and walk out, especially if she has 3 children. So there has to be other factors that are taken into consideration.
And the system's not as easy to maneuver through. I mean, it's definitely better than it was. We're doing the Walk a Mile in Her Shoes on Thursday for Harbor House. And even that, it's still always a challenge. There's not enough space. There's not enough resources. They can only do so much. And if you're not dealing with the problems, there's such a high rate of recidivism with women and men who go to the shelter, but women in general. And then they go back because they don't address the issue or the problem. And there's only so much that Harbor House can do and the other ancillary services can do. So there has to be a way for them to break the cycle, or they're going to continue to come back into the system. Right. It's very much like any kind of, for example, drug addiction and alcohol abuse. You have this thing, and until you figure out where the wound is, I love that, wherever you're wounded, wherever your cause is, and if you're not addressing it, you're going to continue to go back in. One of the things I had the hardest time with my master's degree, which is in health services, was the repeat clients I would see at all of the treatment centers. I knew them by name 3 months in, because each month they would get out and go back out, and then they would be faced with the same situation, the same environment, and not have the tools to handle it, and go right back into the same thing. And it's the same with relationships. If you don't have the tools to handle it or get out of it, or you feel like you can't or don't have the support system, then what are your choices? How do you get out of it? You have children to feed, you have a job, you've got a house, and you don't know what to do.
Yeah, relationships are addictive. Sometimes we think of addiction just as substance or alcohol, or, we'll joke about shopping, but we call it a process addiction. A process addiction are, we're looking at sex and love and food and those types of things. It happens in our mind. There's a psychological bondage that happens. So relationships can be, especially when we look at patterns. So when we're dealing with women in our Women Redeemed group, we're looking at their relationships throughout their life in their totality. And as an objective person, sometimes it's a little bit easier for me to see.
Sure.
If they've never been alone, for example, one after another. They've been monogamous, but they've just one after another. They never had time to really heal and get to know themselves. There's an indication that relationships are used to soothe that wound.
Sure.
And they can use people to a certain degree. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way, because sometimes we don't realize we're using people. We're using them to heal. And, if you're quick to break up, and then the next time you're quick, the next week you're on a date, there's some indication that you're not taking time to heal.
Right. So what do you think are, what are the major issues that you're seeing? Because you obviously do a lot, life counseling solutions. Did I do that right? Yeah, right. I'm on it for a Monday. You address a lot of issues. First of all, I love the fact, thank you for sharing about your sister and your own story. I appreciate that. I think it's brave, and people need to hear that kind of stuff, and they don't hear it from people that they view as professionals or people who have made it, quote unquote. And so I love that, and thank you. But what are the things going on now that you see, challenges that you see, things that are coming to fruition? Either they've gotten worse, there are more instances of them. Are there things that you are seeing out there that you're seeing more of that you weren't expecting?
Yes, so a couple of them. We actually are seeing a lot more domestic violence situations in what we would consider higher functioning couples. And that would mean just professional people that are highly educated. There's lots of more domestic violence we're seeing. We're seeing a lot more infidelity used through social media and through other means. And that is probably 10 out of 10 is brought up with couples. he's talking to his high school friend, or she's been having an emotional affair with her coworker. So there's not necessarily a physical infidelity that has occurred, but there's a lot of emotional and a lot of boundary violations. So couples, one of the things on the premarital side is we talk to couples about talking about how are they going to protect their relationship through social media? Are they going to share passwords, or are they not going to be friends with exes? I mean, what are those and it has to be mutually agreed upon. If one person's dictating those types of things, obviously there's a whole nother issue.
Sure.
So we'll see a lot of social media boundary violations, domestic violence. And another issue that we're seeing, I think a lot of it is also being coming upon with the women movement and a lot of things being addressed as far as women empowerment, is what does it look like for a beta and an alpha? And I'm not talking necessarily about male, female, just the energy. Sometimes there's alpha and alpha energy in a relationship, and there's a lot of clashes with that.
Sure.
So there has to be a beta, or there has to be give and take in those relationships. So redefining relational dynamics so that they can be healthy, and that children in particular can be modeled, healthy dynamics from their parents. So if I see the three biggest trends that I see going on in our counseling as far as a relational standpoint.
Why more domestic violence? And then we'll wrap it up. I'll ask you a couple of other questions. But why do you think that that's on the rise? Why is it become more and more prevalent? Because I also believe that. I see it. I have seen friends that I would never guess are going through that, are going through it. So, and of course, there's still that stigma of embarrassment, of shame. Why is it becoming more prevalent? Are people just more violent? I don't want to be like my parents and say it's all the video games, but is it TV? Is it just the way the culture is? What do you think the reason is? Or is it just too much? Is it just the way that our social media and everything else kind of plays into our lives now?
Well, I take a different approach. So this is just my professional opinion, is that anxiety disorders are on an all-time high. So when I look at anxiety disorders and the pressure, whether it's professionalism, whether it's whatever the pressures are that are going on in different family systems, reactivity is extremely high, where we don't know how to pretty much have self-control, self-regulation. So if people we look at brain research, there's fight or flight. So if someone gets into that fight mode and they're feeling out of control, reactivity is high, anxiety is high, and those moments is what I call they become temporarily insane and do things that they otherwise would regret. So I kind of, in my own experience in therapy, see a lot of it tied to anxiety disorders, not having self-control. And then sometimes there's also high abuse rates as far as prescription drugs. We need to have that wine every night, ladies. There's certain types of things that we're using to regulate our emotions, and we're stuffing it down. And then it becomes to this moment where you feel so out of control, potentially because of untreated anxiety, those types of things. And then you'll do things of which you would otherwise regret. And that's just, I'm making a general statement here.
I love it.
Everyone's situation is different, but in my opinion, I'm seeing a lot more anxiety disorders.
I believe that. All right, so any parting, believe it or not, we're already at 30 minutes past. It went fast. I have so many more questions. We'll have to have Janie back on. Any parting words of wisdom for them? Anything you want to leave them with? I should have told you that before. I usually do. I forgot.
Sure.
Here we're all about transparency here.
Absolutely. The one thing I would say is that if you are watching this show and you resonate with anything that I've said, to reach out and get help. It doesn't necessarily have to be life counseling solutions, but you don't have to suffer alone. We are more successful when we are supported and when we are able to connect with other people who care for us and to be able to help us get through it. A lot of times, no matter what you're going through, sometimes we think we're the only one, and we're probably not. So, whether it's life counseling solutions, whether it's your church, whether it's a trusted friend, whatever you may be going through, you don't have to suffer alone. Reach out and get help.
Thank you. Thank you so, Pernell, you're right. It was a great segment. Mary, too. Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. I think that went faster than, I swear that went so fast, but the information that you gave is so critical because everybody I talk to is suffering with something. They've got something going on. And so what you said at the very end, you don't have to feel alone. We're going to share all of Janie's information. If it's not Janie, though, get help. Reach out to somebody. Too many suicides going on. I didn't get a chance to talk to you about that, but I'd love to talk to you about that sometime. But thank you for being brave and sharing your story with us.
Absolutely.
We love and appreciate you guys. We will see you later, and then I'll post everything as soon as we're done. Love you. Have a great one. Bye.
Bye.